Hi, and welcome to another Parent Pivot podcast. I'm Steve Cummings. I'm flying solo today. Julia is under the weather, so she's not here today. So I thought I would take this opportunity to speak to dads. So if you are a regular listener to the Parent Pivot podcast and you're a mom, you're welcome to keep listening. If you find this to be some helpful information for your husband, great. I would love for him to listen. So far we have not gotten a single text message or email from father or grandfather about this, but there might be multiple reasons for that. But anyway, I'm going to talk about that more at the end of the podcast because I'm going to offer something up to see if I can get a dad out there to text me or email us. But I want to talk to dads only today. And there's a reason for this. I am not a perfect dad, and I've just run into some situations recently where one mom has contacted us, a couple moms have contacted us, and it doesn't seem like dads are on the same page as their wives when it comes to their adult children. And I can understand the reasons because I am a self-confessed, not on the same page dad / husband with my wife when we were raising our adult kids. I didn't do it right. And I think I was always fueled by, the lie that I have to do things right in order to feel, my worth as a dad. And that took over into my parenting. And I am a type A personality. I always say I have recovering type A personality. I charge through life fast and furiously. I'm a Joshua and Caleb, and I charge up the hill, and I want to conquer and do well. And that doesn't do well necessarily in relationships. And as your kids grow older, we're talking about on this podcast, we're now into our third year doing this. And if you're a dad and you've never heard us before, welcome to the Parent Pivot podcast. I'm Steve Cummings, and my wife Julia is not here today, like I said. But I spent a lot of my years in raising our kids ignoring my wife. It just didn't make sense. She is coming at it from a heart level. I'm coming at it from a head level. And we were like two ships crossing in the night. And I just thought, you know what you're saying logically doesn't make sense. The kids just need to submit to my authority. And they just need to be responsible adults. I remember sometimes my kids would be having to go to work at like 10 o'clock in the morning, and they would be leaving the house at 9:55. Well, we all know they're not going to get there in time. So it was always harp. Come on, you need to get there sooner. They're not doing it right. And so I just need to let you know, dads, as you're listening, that I'm a recovering dad who used to really, speaking to my kids about authority and control, and they're not doing it right. And I had a good plan for their life and they just weren't following it. I love you and have a wonderful plan for your life. You're just not following it. I want to point you to one podcast, and I will put the notes in a link to that podcast in our notes. And that's when we interview our son, Jackson. And pretty much the bottom line of that is I went to the sidelines as dad after 23 years of trying to be dad, and we just weren't connecting. Again, Jackson was coming from a heart. I'm coming from the head. And as I learned to get more into my heart, because we men do not know how to get into our heart. We are told that we're wimps. We're weak if we get into our hearts, if we express any kind of emotion or feeling. And guess what? That's a lie from the pit of hell. It is a sign of strength to ask for help. And to come alongside other men where we're safe to feel authentic and vulnerable and be honest about life's failures. Because guess what? Life is about failing. And the more we stuff down and not know why we're doing what we're doing, the more relationships we fracture. So I just want to quickly discuss some things that could really help benefit you as a dad, as a grandfather. And maybe you've already done all these things, and that's great. And you can tune me out, or there might be something that you pick up on, or you can just sit back and listen. But one of the things with Jackson was going to the sidelines is that there were other men that were going to speak life into him and father him in ways that I could not. And as we record that podcast, I was surprised my wife asked me that question. And then I was even more surprised by Jackson's answer. I'm not going to give it away, but I am going to point you to it because this is the road to healthy relationships with your adult kids. Why was I doing that? Well, I look back and I was trying to seek some type of identity that somehow I had to be the good father by my children behaving well. Like you didn't want to be anywhere. You didn't want to go to church. You didn't want to be somewhere where your kids were misbehaving, right? And things, because somehow it was a reflection on me. And one thing I was completely unaware of was my own anxiety. I was completely unaware of my own anxiety that brought me shame and discouragement and things about being a dad. And so what I did was I did the opposite. I'm a fighter when it comes to that. So I went for control as opposed to shrinking back and thinking, oh, woe is me. I need therapy. I need medication. I need prescriptions. But if I could control the things that I was anxious about or worried about or was fearful about, and that included my kids, then that's how I dealt with my anxiety. And I kind of want to address that. How do you handle your anxiety? Are you even aware that you are anxious? Because anxiety can either incapacitate us or it can make us fight. And like I said, if it incapacitates you, then you're like going, oh my gosh, what do I do about this? And I'm not, again, Julie and I are trained and certified counselors in the state of Georgia. And we are big fans of talking to a third party and getting that taken care of. And sometimes you need that. So this is not to cast shame. In fact, just less than a year ago, I started taking anxiety medication, but I only needed it for a short time. I'm actually weaning myself off of it now, and I'm fine. So this isn't to shame any of you dads saying, oh, don't do that. But the other part about anxiety is we can go into denial. We like a good argument. We don't want to believe our wives when they tell us that. And we're going into denial because I would rather control people and my circumstances than things. And that's how I'm going to deal with my anxiety. So here's what I would recommend, dads. A couple things. We need to get on the same page as our wives when it comes to our adult kids. Why? You're not going to like this first one. Are you ready? More often than not, she's right. She's right because she has birthed these kids. She has nurtured them. She is connected to them in a deeper way sometimes than we are as men. I'm not saying that all men are not connected to their kids. We like to go to their games, their activities, whether it's sports or art or theater or piano lessons or orchestra or you name it. We're there and we're cheering them on and being the great cheerleaders that they are. But when it comes to the emotional makeup and it comes to relationship, our wives are more the expert than we are. Trust me, I'm married to a therapist. It took me 27 years of marriage to finally listen to my wife and go, you know what? She might be right. Let me give you another tip, and I'll put this in the show notes. I came across a book written by Skip Moen titled Guardian Angel. I will put that in the show notes. And it talks about the Hebrew word for helper. And I know traditional church, you're talking to a guy who has this advanced degree. I only tell you that because, I've studied and heard it said thousands of times. I'm not any expert, but I had to listen to a Hebrew scholar talk about that word helper back in Genesis, that God gives our wives as helpers. And the Hebrew word is Ezer Kenedgo. Our wives are our Ezer Kenedgo. And you know what that means is? What that means is I can talk. Good thing my wife's not here. She'd be correcting my grammar. What that means is she has our back. She sees our blind spots and we don't trust it. I'll tell you over and over, there were times in our early married life that we're making a decision whether we should go to this church or be a part of that church or whatever. And Julie would say, this just doesn't feel right. And I'm going, what do you mean doesn't feel right? It's got this, and this. And she'd go, yeah, I know. And here I was, it logically made sense and things, but she was just sensing there's just something that's not right. And Skip Moen goes through this book, Guardian Angel, and says, this is how our wives are gifted. They're given to us as our partner, as our helpmate, because they see those things. They sense those things. And guess what? This is where I'm going to go with this. She's always right. She's seeing and feeling things that are remember how the thing talks about how women are spaghetti and men were like waffles? She's got everything connected from the time that we first met to the current thing, and everything's all related. And we're like going, what are you talking about? I'm looking for the right box to pull out of my brain and go inside there and going, that doesn't make sense. But if your wife is a born again believer and follows Christ and is humble, and she's a Proverbs 31 woman, guess what? She doesn't want us to be embarrassed in the market square. So this is why I say lean into her, even when it looks like it logically doesn't make sense, because otherwise we're on a path of destruction because we want to control and prove that they're right. Let me give you an analogy. Let's put it in an employee standpoint. We've all worked for tough bosses who ruled with an iron fist, who were micromanagers, and we just came home just belly aching and complaining. It's like, you know what? They don't trust me. They won't let me do this. I know how to do my job. They want all this stuff and da 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 da. And that just became a sore spot. And like going, we probably, if you're like me, it's like, you know what? I'm not happy here. I don't care how much they're paying me. But everything you read on LinkedIn, it talks about, hey, if you have a great work environment and people enjoy working there and you're letting them succeed, people will stay. But we've all worked for somebody, or maybe it was a coach, or maybe it was somebody else who's trying to be the know-it-all, trying to tell you, you need to do this and you're not doing it right. So think about that. Well, the same thing holds true with our adult kids. I mean, think about it. If you had an employer, what would happen if your employer said, hey, Steve, what do you think we should do with this situation or this project or whatever? And I would be, wow, first of all, I'm esteemed that you would even ask me. And I'm going, wow, you're inviting my participation into this. Well, I think we should think outside the box and do this, something that maybe you hadn't thought of. That's great. Why don't you take this on? Why don't you run with it and keep me posted on what's going on? I'm going to come home and going, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe what happened at work today. My boss believes in me. He's given me this incredible opportunity. And guess what? We're going to take off and we're going to soar and we're going to thrive. And the same thing is with our adult kids. If we're looking at them going, you're not getting the grades, or you're not going to college, or you haven't gotten a job, or you're not doing fill in the blank, all we're doing is beating them over the head and telling them what an awful way that they're leading their lives, because I know better as dad. You just need to listen to me. I'm dad, and that's it. What would happen if we let go of the rope and instead of trying to control them and take care of our anxiety? That's really what this is about. They're not performing, they're not achieving, they're not striving. And guess what? Life isn't about that. As we become empty nesters and launch our kids, whether you've got an adult child that's just started off to college, or all your kids are married or are married and away from you, it's the same thing. It's like, how do I keep my mouth shut and the welcome mat out, which is the premise of our podcast and things. How do I let go of control? How do I be the wind under their wings? We continue to try to do that with our kids. And fortunately, we have found that has been the best healthy way to maintain relationship, is to take a step back and surrender. Because after all, they belong to the Lord. They don't belong to me. And when they reach that age of accountability, which, by the way, I forgot what the passage is. I'll have to look it back up. I just came across this like a month or so ago. The age of accountability is 20. And God talks about it when he sends the Israelites into their 40 years of wandering the wilderness. It's like everyone over 20 was now accountable to God, and those under 20 were accountable to their parents. So that's what the age is. So as you begin to let go of that rope, it's very, very hard. I want to tell you that you can be the hero in your own legacy without drawing attention to yourself. When you release the reins, when you invite them and ask questions, seek to understand their heart, not trying to control them, not trying to fulfill expectations you have. Because guess what? God has a different trajectory for their life. He has a different plan for their life. We're all cut differently. There are some things where the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, in good ways and in not so good ways. And I hope my kids can realize the not so good ways of this dad and can make up for that. And at the same time, though, I'm still going to be the wind under the wings. I want to ask them, what has God created you to do? That's what we did with our kids. In fact, one of the things we did when they were in high school is they graduated high school, and I said, hey, instead of going out and going immediately to college and wasting my money and your time, we want you to take a gap year. And we sent them on, they got to choose a Bible school to go to for like 8 or 9 months. And two of them went to Tauernhof, Austria. One went with YWAM, and another one went with another different school that was with the same organization, not YWAM, the other one, Torchbearers. Anyway, our whole idea was, hey, I'm not going to be on this earth longer than you, more than likely. I want to make sure that you can go out and build community with other believers around the world, wherever God's going to put you. And you can also distinguish good Bible teaching from false Bible teaching. And guess what? They all came back more deeper connected into their faith. And that's what we want to do. We want to launch them. We want to equip them. We want them to be that employee who's going to get Employee of the Month every month. And the only way we can do that is to invest in them. So, Dad, I just want to say, hey, here's what we need to do. Here's how you become the hero. One, we need to stop striving. We need to stop striving to be the king of the house, the king of the family, and be the sage. Let them come to us to ask for that. We need to stop controlling. You might be a controller, and what you really realize is I've got anxiety. I will admit I have anxiety. And we've mentioned this over and over again in our podcast. There's an app by Wild at Heart called the 1 Minute Pause. And I use that 1 Minute Pause app every day for 3.5 years without missing a day. Why? Because of my anxiety. I literally had to surrender everyone and everything to the Father because there's nothing I can do there. It's out of my control. And what I found out was I received more peace and freedom in my life. I had healthier relationships with my adult kids. It was a game changer for me. So if you're looking for a game changer, I'll put that in the show notes. So that helps. The other thing we need to do is to stop instructing and pointing to the right thing. Is it right for who? You know, a college education nowadays, and please don't hit the stop button here. A college education puts them in debt and isn't needed anymore like it was when we were growing up. So I want to ask them, what has God uniquely gifted you to do? And whatever you do, do it for the glory of God. So help them find that out. You know, it's their story. I want to be a side character in their story, and I want to see them succeed. And then the last thing is for us to just stop trying for them to meet our expectations for their life, and instead be a champion of them, and not about what they do, but who they are. We've been at this now for the last, Jackson's now 28, so 5, 6, 7 years, plus a lot of my own therapy of understanding my own heart and where I'm coming from and what's the why beneath the what. Why do I want this to happen? It's more about me than it's about them. And I have a couple of suggestions for you that I'm going to offer to you free. Again, here comes my money back guarantee, because I don't know if there's any dads out there listening to the Parent Pivot podcast. But if you're watching me on YouTube or you're listening to me and you're going, Steve, that all makes sense, I'd love to find out more. A game changer for me is a guy who wrote a book called Heart of a Warrior, The Heart of a Warrior by Michael Thompson. The subtitle is, Before You Can Become the Warrior, You Must Become the Beloved Son. And that was a game changer for me, both as a dad, a husband, a father, a grandfather, a disciple of Jesus. And that blew me away. And Michael Thompson is now a real good friend of mine. I'm going to put a connection to that. But guess what? Here's what I'm offering. He actually wrote a second book, and it's called King Me, Loving and Leading in a Wounding World. And if you've got adult sons out there who are starting their families, this is not about, read this book and then you can change them. This is about understanding our role as a king or a sage and helping to just sit back, release control, and let the Father do all the work. So I'm going to offer a copy of either one of these books, either Heart of a Warrior by Michael Thompson or King Me, for FREE. And all you need to do is send me a text message and saying, I will read that, because I usually tell men when I give this, and I've got a ministry that I will also point you to called Bringing Kingdom. And I tell these men that I meet with, I don't want you to read this book just because I said so and it was good. If your heart is hungry for it and you feel like I could use this is going to speak some truth to your heart and change things and get you into your heart and understand your identity, then your relationships, all your relationships, work relationships, family relationships, your marriage, they're going to start to shift and change and become so much healthier. So if you have a desire and you will read that, I want you to savor it like a good steak. I don't want you to speed through it going, okay, check the box, check the list. Okay, now, because then your heart's not in it. You're just doing it because I said this was a good thing. I want you to bathe yourself in it. So either one of these books, The Heart of a Warrior or King Me, I will send you free. Here's my cell phone number. You ready? Send me a text. Hey, Steve, 714-742-9625. 714-742-9625. Say, hey, this is Pete. Here's my address. I heard you on the Parent Pivot podcast. And yes, men do listen to this. I would like a copy of, and then tell me which one you want a copy of. And I will send that in the mail on my dime. You can have that. That's part of my ministry that's called Bringing Kingdom. I'll put a link into that. But I really have a heart to help other men get into their hearts, become the dads, the grandfathers that God's intended us to be, to raise healthy adult sons and daughters where we can just be the wind under their wings and we can keep our mouths shut and the welcome mat out. How'd you like that? You can't see me. Because that's what we're all about. Julie and I love doing this. If you want to talk some more, you can also email me at parentpivotpodcast@gmail.com. And we're also on all the social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. If you're on those, you can direct message me at Parent Pivot Podcast. I'm going to kind of see, gosh, if I got 10 guys out there that text me or email me, that would be amazing. And thanks. And I hope you listen to this. I hope it brings some light to your heart. I pray that you, whatever challenge or struggles that you might be facing with your adult kids, I pray that this is helpful and we can continue to have conversations about it. So thanks, men who are listening. Wives, you can hit the stop button and send a link and saying, hey, this guy, Steve, on the Parent Pivot podcast, he's got one for dads only, and it's only just 22 minutes. And then we'll be back next week for another edition of the Parent Pivot podcast. I promise I'll bring Julia. Bye.